Evelyn Carter's wedding day should have been perfect. White roses, champagne, the safe marriage she'd planned down to the last detail. Instead, armored SUVs crashed through the garden gates during her vows. A dangerous stranger in a black suit strode down the aisle, stopped 3 feet from her trembling hands, and said 5 words that destroyed everything. "That child is mine, doctor." Gunfire erupted. Her fiancé ran, and the crime boss who interrupted her ceremony became the only thing standing between her and a bullet. Some love stories start with a kiss. This one started with kidnapping. If you want to see how Evelyn's shattered wedding leads to the most dangerous love story she never saw coming, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Mem. The June morning broke over Boston with the kind of golden light that belonged in bridal magazines. Evelyn Carter stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite of the Fairmont Hotel, her reflection almost unrecognizable. The ivory gown fit perfectly, off-shoulder lace that made her look elegant and untouchable. Her dark hair was swept into an intricate updo, secured with pearl pins that had belonged to her grandmother. Everything about the moment whispered refinement, control, careful planning. Everything except the secret growing beneath the empire waist of her dress. Evelyn pressed one hand lightly against her abdomen, feeling nothing yet, but knowing everything. 12 weeks. A life created not from passion, but from procedure, from paperwork and medical precision at the Riverside Fertility Clinic. A choice she'd made alone, methodically, the way she made all her decisions. Her fiancé, Richard Blackwell III, didn't know. Nobody knew. "You look absolutely stunning." Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes already glistening with tears. Margaret Carter had been planning this wedding for months with the fervor of a military campaign. "I still can't believe my little girl is marrying into the Blackwell family." Evelyn managed to smile. The Blackwell family, old Boston money, pharmaceutical empire, the kind of dynasty that appeared in financial magazines and charity galas. Richard was handsome in that patrician way, with good teeth and better manners. He was safe, predictable. He'd proposed after 8 months of dating with all the romance of a corporate merger, which was exactly what Evelyn had wanted, or what she'd convinced herself she wanted. "The cars are ready," her mother continued, fussing with the train of Evelyn's dress. "The garden looks like something out of a fairy tale. 300 guests, darling. The governor is here. This is everything we dreamed of." "You dreamed of," Evelyn thought, but didn't say. She'd learned long ago that her mother's dreams and her own had very different shapes. "I need a moment," Evelyn said quietly. "Just a few minutes alone, please." Her mother's expression flickered with concern, but she nodded. "Don't be long. We can't keep everyone waiting." The door closed with a soft click. Evelyn exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the vanity. Her reflection stared back, composed, beautiful, utterly terrified. The truth was simple and devastating. She didn't love Richard Blackwell. She respected him, appreciated his stability, valued the partnership they'd discussed like a business arrangement. But love? The kind that made your heart race and your hands shake? That had died 3 years ago with someone else, someone her family had deemed completely unsuitable. The baby changed everything. The baby changed nothing. She'd gone to the fertility clinic 6 months before Richard's proposal, driven by a fear she barely admitted to herself, that she was running out of time, that if she waited for the right person and the right moment, she'd wake up one day with neither. The clinic had been discreet, professional, expensive. Donor 7743, tall, intelligent, healthy genetic profile. Everything quantified, nothing left to chance or feeling. And now that child was real, growing, hers. Richard would accept it. She'd tell him on the honeymoon, frame it carefully. He wanted an heir eventually anyway. It would be fine. Everything would be fine. Evelyn repeated that lie to herself as she smoothed her dress and stepped into the hallway where her father waited, distinguished in his tuxedo. "Ready, sweetheart?" Dr. Henry Carter extended his arm. His eyes were kind but distant, the way they'd been since she was a child. He'd always been more comfortable with animals than people. They'd had that in common, at least. It's why she'd followed him into veterinary medicine. "Ready," Evelyn lied. The ceremony was held in the private garden of the Fairmont's estate grounds. Manicured lawns, climbing roses, white chairs arranged in perfect rows. A string quartet played softly as Evelyn appeared at the entrance. 300 faces turned toward her. Cameras flashed. Her mother wept. Richard stood at the altar in an impeccable tuxedo, his expression pleased but not overwhelmed, as if she were right on schedule. The walk down the aisle felt impossibly long. Each step brought her closer to a future that felt increasingly like a cage dressed in flowers. She focused on breathing, on keeping her expression serene, on not thinking about the tiny heartbeat inside her that Richard knew nothing about. Halfway down the aisle, something changed. A low rumble of engines, barely audible beneath the quartet's performance. Several guests turned, distracted. Evelyn's father hesitated mid-step. Then the gates exploded inward. Not literally, no explosion, no fire, but the heavy wrought iron gates burst open as if torn apart by invisible hands. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows roared through the opening, tires tearing up the pristine lawn. The vehicles were armored, massive, moving with military precision. Screaming started immediately. Guests scattered from their chairs. The quartet's violinist dropped her bow. Security guards appeared from nowhere, shouting into radios, hands moving toward concealed weapons. The SUVs screeched to a halt 15 feet from the aisle. Evelyn stood frozen, her father's arm rigid beneath her grip. Her mind struggled to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. This was a wedding. This was Boston society. Things like this didn't happen here. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. Men emerged. 6 of them, wearing dark suits that couldn't hide the weapons beneath. They moved like soldiers, forming a protective corridor. And through that corridor walked a man who made Evelyn's breath stop completely. He was tall, taller than Richard, broader through the shoulders. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman coins, strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, olive skin that spoke of Mediterranean ancestry. But it was his eyes that held her, dark, intense, absolutely certain. He walked straight down the aisle toward her. Evelyn Carter. His voice carried across the chaos, deep and accented. Italian, she realized distantly. Not a question, a statement. Security guards converged, but his men moved faster. Weapons appeared, not pointed at anyone but visible. A clear message. Richard was shouting something. Her mother had fainted into the arms of a groomsman. The minister backed away from the altar, Bible clutched to his chest. The stranger stopped 3 feet from Evelyn. Up close, he was devastating. Not handsome in Richard's polished way, but beautiful in the manner of dangerous things. Storms, cliffs, predators. "My name is Marco DeLuca," he said, his gaze locked on hers. "And that child you're carrying is mine." The world tilted. Evelyn's hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. "What? No, you're insane. The Riverside Fertility Clinic." His voice cut through her denial like a blade. "Donor 7743. Except there was no donor. There was me. My genetic material stolen and sold without my knowledge or consent. That's impossible. I have the DNA analysis. I have the clinic's financial records. I have the name of the doctor who arranged the theft." Marco's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You were chosen specifically, Dr. Carter. Your profile, your background, your family connections. You were marked as leverage from the moment you walked into that clinic." Evelyn shook her head violently. This was madness. "I don't know you. I don't know who you are or what you want, but I want my child safe." The intensity in his voice stopped her cold. "And right now, you are both in danger." "Security!" Richard found his voice, striding forward with all the outrage of inherited authority. "Remove this lunatic immediately!" Marco's men shifted. Richard froze. "You should leave now, Mr. Blackwell," Marco said without looking at him. "This doesn't concern you." "Like hell it doesn't. She's my fiancée. She's the mother of my son." Marco's gaze finally moved to Richard, and whatever the younger man saw there made him step back involuntarily. "A son that several dangerous people now know about. A son that makes both of you targets." "This is ridiculous," Evelyn's father interjected, his doctor's rationality trying to impose order. "If you have concerns about the clinic's procedures, There are legal channels. Gunfire shattered his words. It came from the perimeter, sharp cracks that sent birds exploding from nearby trees. Guests screamed again, diving for cover. Marco's men reacted instantly, weapons raised, forming a protective circle. Down! Marco's hand shot out, catching Evelyn's wrist. He pulled her behind the shield of his body as more shots rang out. Her father stumbled, confused. Richard was already running toward the hotel. Evelyn's veterinary training kicked in, the same calm that descended when dealing with wounded animals. She assessed rapidly. No one hit yet. Gunfire coming from the tree line, Marco's men returning fire with professional precision. How many? Marco barked to one of his men. At least 4, boss. Professional setup. They were waiting. Marco cursed in Italian, then his attention snapped back to Evelyn. Listen to me very carefully. The people shooting at us now are the same people who wanted you pregnant with my child. They've been watching you for weeks, waiting until you were vulnerable. Today was supposed to be your wedding. Tomorrow, you were supposed to be kidnapped. Why? The word came out strangled. Why would anyone? Because I'm Marco DeLuca. He said it like that explained everything. And my enemies will use anything against me. Anyone. A child I didn't know about until 3 days ago is still my child. And you're caught in the middle. An SUV exploded at the perimeter, not one of Marco's, a security vehicle. Flames roared skyward. The shooting intensified. We're leaving, Marco said flatly. Now. I'm not going anywhere with you. Dr. Carter. He stepped closer, and she saw something in his face that shocked her. Genuine fear. Not for himself, for her. In approximately 30 seconds, those men will breach the garden. They will kill everyone between them and you. They will take you to a location where you'll be held until I surrender significant portions of my business empire. Then they'll kill you anyway because loose ends are dangerous. His hand tightened on her wrist. Or you can come with me now and live. You're one of them, Evelyn whispered. You're a criminal. You said so yourself, your enemies, your empire. Yes. No denial, no softening. I am, but I'm the criminal trying to save your life, not end it. Another explosion, closer. Part of the garden's decorative fountain disintegrated in a spray of stone and water. Evelyn looked at her father, who stood frozen in shock. At Richard, who'd made it to the hotel entrance and wasn't looking back. At 300 wedding guests screaming and running in every direction. At the stranger whose genetic material had created the life inside her. If I go with you, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I need your word. No harm comes to my family. You have it. And I see this proof. Everything. The clinic records, the DNA results, all of it. Done. And you let me go when this is over? Something crossed Marco's face, too quick to read. When you and the child are safe, you can make that choice. Not a promise. But it was all she was going to get. Evelyn took his hand. They ran. Marco's men surrounded them, a moving fortress of bodies and weapons. They covered the distance to the SUVs in seconds. Someone, one of Marco's men, was hit, stumbled, was hauled forward by a companion without breaking stride. Evelyn was pushed into the backseat of the center vehicle. Marco slid in beside her, barking orders in Italian. The door slammed. Bulletproof glass, she realized, as rounds sparked off the window. The vehicle lurched forward before she could even register what was happening. Behind them, her wedding burned. Through the rear window, she watched the garden disappear, white chairs overturned, roses trampled, smoke rising from multiple fires. Emergency vehicles were arriving, sirens wailing. Her mother was probably hysterical. Her father was probably in shock. And she was in the back of an armored SUV with a crime boss who claimed to be the father of her child. Put this on. Marco handed her a bulletproof vest. When she hesitated, his voice gentled. Please. Evelyn's hand shook as she pulled the vest over her wedding dress. The absurdity of the image, lace and Kevlar, almost made her laugh. Almost. Where are we going, Tan? She asked. Somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. Marco was scanning the street, his phone in one hand. He fired off several texts in rapid Italian. We were compromised. Someone in the clinic talked, or someone in my organization. Either way, they knew about today. How long? Evelyn's mind was starting to work again, processing through the shock. How long have you known about this? 3 days. Marco's jaw tightened. A contact in the medical examiner's office flagged the clinic for irregularities. By the time I had confirmation of what they'd done, you were 72 hours from walking down the aisle. And you couldn't have approached me before crashing my wedding with armed men? I sent 4 different messages. Your phone has been monitored and intercepted for weeks. He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I had no choice, Dr. Carter. They were moving today. So was I. The SUV took a corner fast enough to make her grab the door handle. They were leaving downtown Boston, heading toward, she didn't know where. Everything outside the window was a blur. I want to see the proof, Evelyn said. Now. Marco pulled out a tablet, unlocked it, handed it over. Start with the folder marked Clinic Records. Evelyn's hands still trembled as she opened the file. What she saw made her blood run cold. Patient files. Dozens of them. All women who'd used the Riverside Fertility Clinic, all flagged with notes about family connections, wealth, potential leverage. Her own file was there. Photographs, medical history, family tree, financial analysis. Someone had compiled a dossier on her life that was terrifyingly thorough. And in the notes section, ideal candidate. Proceed with DeLuca sample, confirmed pregnancy 0315. Wedding scheduled 0623. Extraction window 0624 to 0701. Extraction window. They'd planned to kidnap her the day after her wedding. Keep reading, Marco said quietly. She did. DNA analysis comparing samples from Marco's medical records with the donor profile she'd selected. Match 99.9%. Financial transactions showing payment from an offshore account to the clinic's director. Communications discussing genetic acquisition without consent. Her hands started shaking harder. They stole from you, she whispered. They stole from both of us. Marco's voice was flat, controlled, but she heard the rage underneath. They weaponized a child that neither of us chose to create, and they were prepared to destroy your life to use that child against me. Evelyn closed the tablet, unable to look at any more. Her wedding dress suddenly felt suffocating. The vest was too tight. The air in the SUV wasn't enough. I'm going to be sick, she said. Marco immediately ordered the driver to pull over. They stopped at the side of a tree-lined road she didn't recognize. Marco opened the door, helped her out with a hand that was surprisingly gentle. Evelyn made it 3 steps before her knees buckled. She sank onto the grass, not vomiting, but unable to stand. The enormity of it crashed over her. Everything she'd believed about the past 6 months was a lie. Her pregnancy wasn't her choice. It was a weapon. She was a weapon, against a man she'd never met. Marco crouched beside her, not touching, just present. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. I chose this. Her voice broke. I went to that clinic. I selected the donor. I thought I was taking control of my life, and instead I walked into a trap. You couldn't have known. I should have known something was wrong. The pricing was too good. The availability too convenient. I was so focused on what I wanted that I didn't question. She stopped, pressing her hands against her face. Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then, I built an empire on reading people, Dr. Carter, on seeing angles and leverage and weakness. And I didn't see this coming either. We were both played. Why you? Evelyn lowered her hands, looking at him directly. What are you that someone would go through all this? I run the largest import-export operation on the eastern seaboard. Marco's expression didn't change. Legal and otherwise. I have connections to families in New York, Miami, Chicago. I broker deals, settle disputes, move product. I'm valuable to many people. Dangerous to many more. You're a criminal. Yes. No apology, no justification, just the truth. And now I'm carrying your child, Evelyn said. A child conceived without either of our consent. A child that other criminals want to use against you. Yes. This is insane. Yes. Marco stood, offering his hand. But it's real, and we need to keep moving. This road isn't secure. Evelyn stared at his hand. If she took it, if she got back in that SUV, she was accepting all of this. The danger, the lies, the impossible situation. But the alternative was going back. Back to her burning wedding, back to Richard, who'd run, back to a life that had already been destroyed. She took Marco's hand. They drove for another hour, winding through roads that grew progressively more rural. Finally, they turned onto a private drive that led through dense woods. The estate that emerged was stunning, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and stone perched on a hillside with views of the Atlantic. "Home," Marco said simply. The SUV pulled up to the entrance. More men in suits waited, security, clearly. Marco helped Evelyn out, and she stood swaying slightly in her wedding dress and bulletproof vest, feeling like she'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. "Enzo will show you to a room," Marco said. "You should rest." "I can't rest. I need to call my family. Your phone was left at the hotel. For your safety and theirs." He held up a hand before she could protest. "Tomorrow, you can use a secure line, but tonight they think you're either kidnapped or in protective custody. Let them think that. It's safer." Safer than the truth? Much safer than the truth. A woman appeared, older, elegant, her expression kind. "Dr. Carter, I'm Maria. I'll help you get comfortable." Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, demand contact with her family, demand control over a situation that had spiraled completely beyond her grasp. But exhaustion was crashing over her in waves, and the baby, God, the baby, she needed to think about the baby. "Fine," she whispered, "but tomorrow, we talk. About everything." Marco nodded. "Tomorrow." Maria led her through the house. It was beautiful, she registered distantly. Modern, but warm, expensive, but not ostentatious. The room she was shown to had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, a massive bed, an attached bathroom larger than her apartment's entire bedroom. "There are clothes in the closet," Maria said gently. "They should fit. I'll bring you something to eat shortly. Do you have any dietary restrictions? Anything the baby needs?" The kindness in her voice, the acknowledgement of the pregnancy, nearly broke Evelyn's composure. "No," she managed. "Thank you, thank." Maria squeezed her hand and left. Alone, finally, Evelyn sank onto the edge of the bed. Her reflection in the window glass showed a stranger. A woman in a torn wedding dress and bulletproof vest, mascara-streaked, hair falling from its elegant updo. Her hand moved to her stomach again. This tiny life, created without love or consent, caught in the crossfire of criminals and conspiracies. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the child. "I'm so sorry." But sorry wouldn't change anything. Sorry wouldn't make this safe. Evelyn stood, unzipped the vest, let it fall. Then she turned her back to the mirror and started the painstaking process of unfastening her wedding dress. Each pearl button felt like shedding a layer of the person she'd been that morning. The woman who thought she had control. The woman who thought she was choosing her own path. That woman was gone, burned up with the roses and the lies. By the time Evelyn stepped into the shower, letting scalding water wash away makeup and hairspray and the last remnants of her perfect wedding day, she'd made a decision. She didn't know Marco DeLuca, didn't trust him, had every reason to be terrified of him, but he'd told her the truth when he could have lied. He'd protected her when he could have used her, and right now he was the only thing standing between her child and the people who wanted to weaponize an innocent life. So she would survive this. She would learn everything about the conspiracy that had violated her body and her choices. She would make sure her child was safe. And then, only then, would she decide what came next. The water turned cold before she finally shut it off. Tomorrow would bring more answers, more danger, more impossible choices. But tonight, for the first time in 12 weeks, Evelyn Carter stopped planning and started fighting back. Evelyn woke to silence so complete it felt wrong. No traffic sounds, no neighbors, no familiar hum of the city that had been her background music for 32 years. Just the distant crash of waves and the whisper of wind through trees. For one disoriented moment, she thought she'd dreamed it all. The wedding, the guns, Marco DeLuca. Then she opened her eyes to unfamiliar ceiling beams and floor-to-ceiling windows framing an ocean view, and reality crashed back with crushing weight. She was in a crime boss's house, pregnant with his stolen child. hunted by people she'd never met for reasons that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with genetic material she hadn't chosen. Evelyn sat up slowly, pressing one hand to her abdomen. 12 weeks and 2 days now. The baby was the size of a plum, according to the pregnancy app she'd downloaded in secret, developing vocal cords, intestines, bone marrow. A tiny human growing inside her, completely oblivious to the chaos surrounding its existence. "I'm going to keep you safe," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I will." The clothes Maria had mentioned were indeed in the closet, expensive casual wear in her exact size, which should have been comforting but was actually unnerving. Someone had known her measurements. Someone had prepared for her arrival. She chose dark jeans and a soft cotton sweater, grateful to be out of the wedding dress that still lay crumpled on the bathroom floor like the corpse of her former life. Her reflection in the mirror showed exhaustion, dark circles, pale skin, hair in desperate need of brushing. But her eyes were clear, determined. The house was easier to navigate in daylight. Evelyn followed the scent of coffee down a floating staircase into an open-concept living area that was all clean lines and expensive minimalism. The ocean dominated one entire wall of windows. Under different circumstances, she might have found it beautiful. Marco stood at the kitchen island, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt rolled to his elbows, reading something on his phone. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, two strangers bound together by biology and conspiracy. "Coffee?" he offered. "I'm pregnant." "There's decaf." Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. "Yes, please." He poured from a second carafe, added cream without asking how she took it. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed, and she felt a jolt of awareness that was completely inappropriate given the circumstances. "You knew how I drink my coffee," she said. "I know everything about you, Dr. Carter." Marco's expression was unreadable. "Your favorite restaurant, your college GPA, the fact that you volunteer at the animal shelter every other Saturday. When someone becomes a target, I learn everything." "That should terrify me." "It should." "Does it?" Evelyn considered. "Less than it did yesterday, which might mean I'm in shock." "You're not in shock. You're adapting." Marco gestured to a stool at the island. "Sit. You need to eat." Maria appeared as if summoned, carrying a tray laden with breakfast: eggs, toast, fruit, yogurt. She set it down with a gentle smile that Evelyn was beginning to recognize as genuine kindness in a house built on violence. "Thank you," Evelyn said softly. "Of course, dear. You're eating for two now." Maria patted her shoulder before disappearing back toward what Evelyn assumed was the kitchen. Marco waited until she'd taken several bites before speaking again. "We need to discuss the situation." "Which situation? The fact that I was kidnapped from my wedding? That my pregnancy was orchestrated by criminals? That people are trying to kill me for leverage against you? I need you to be more specific." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You have your mother's sarcasm. It was in your file." "My file, right. The complete dossier on my life that strangers compiled without my knowledge." Evelyn set down her fork. "I want to see everything, not just what you showed me yesterday. Everything you know about who did this and why." "After you eat." "Now." Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, typed something, and slid it across the counter. "Carlos is bringing the full briefing to the study. 10 minutes. Eat." It wasn't a request, but Evelyn found herself picking up her fork again anyway. Partially because he was right, she needed food. Partially because she recognized the tone. He'd made a decision about her safety, and arguing would waste energy she didn't have. "How's my family?" she asked between bites. "Your mother is staying with your aunt in Cambridge. Your father is at your parents' house with private security I arranged. Both believe you're in protective custody with federal authorities." "And Richard?" "Gave a statement to police and returned to his apartment. He's made 3 calls to his lawyer and 7 to his mother. No attempts to contact your family." Marco's voice was neutral, but she heard the judgment underneath. "He's not a bad person," Evelyn said, though she didn't know why she was defending the man who'd run from gunfire while she was pulled into an SUV. "He's just not built for violence." "No, he's built for boardrooms and country clubs. Nothing wrong with that, except when it leaves you unprotected. And you're built for violence." "Yes." Again, no apology, just fact. Evelyn finished eating in silence, washing down the last of the toast with decaf that was better than it had any right to be. When she set down the cup, Marco was already standing. "Come, I'll show you everything." The study was exactly what she'd expected from a crime boss. Dark wood, leather furniture, walls lined with books in Italian and English. But there were surprises too. A collection of what looked like first edition poetry volumes, a photograph of a much younger Marco with an elderly woman who had his same dark eyes, fresh flowers in a crystal vase. Carlos, one of the men from yesterday, waited inside with a tablet and several folders. He nodded respectfully to Evelyn before handing everything to Marco. "Privacy," Marco said simply. Carlos left without a word. Marco spread the folders across the massive desk. "This is everything we've compiled in the past 72 hours. The clinic's records, financial transactions, the players involved, what we know about the kidnapping plan, what we don't know." Evelyn moved closer, her heart hammering. The first folder contained medical files, not just hers, but a dozen other women. All had used Riverside Fertility Clinic. All had been implanted with genetic material that didn't match their donor selection. All had different men's names attached: DeLuca, Marchetti, Volkov, Chen. Powerful names, she realized. Dangerous names. "They did this to other people?" Her voice came out strangled. 12 women total over the past 2 years. You're the 9th pregnancy that took. 3 miscarriages, 2 terminated when the women discovered the switch. Marco's jaw tightened. The clinic was creating biological weapons. Children that could be used for leverage, blackmail, or ransom against men who don't respond to traditional pressure. Evelyn's hands shook as she opened the next folder. Financial records showing money flowing from offshore accounts to the clinic's director, Dr. Patricia Weston. Names she didn't recognize. Shell corporations. A web of transactions designed to hide the source. "Who's behind it?" she asked. "That's the question we're still answering." Marco pulled out a photograph. A man in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit. Distinguished looking, the kind of man who belonged at charity galas. "This is Victor Castellano. He owns the shell corporations that paid the clinic. He's connected to families in New York and Philadelphia. Old money, old grudges." "Why would he target you specifically?" "Because 5 years ago, I brokered a deal that cost him a shipping contract worth $300 million. Because I'm younger, faster, and taking territory he thinks belongs to him. Because in our world, revenge is currency." Marco set down the photograph. "But Castellano doesn't have the medical connections to pull this off alone. Someone else provided the expertise." He showed her another photo. A woman this time, late 40s, severe features. Dr. Patricia Weston, according to the caption. "She ran the clinic," Marco continued. "Medical director, impeccable credentials, access to genetic material from hundreds of donors. She recruited women who fit specific profiles, stable, successful, unlikely to ask too many questions. Women who wanted control over their reproductive choices." The irony wasn't lost on Evelyn. "Women like me." "Yes." She turned to the next section, surveillance photos. Her stomach dropped. Images of herself leaving her veterinary clinic, having coffee with friends, walking through Boston Common. Dated over the past 3 months. Someone had been watching her long before she'd even suspected. "The plan was sophisticated," Marco said quietly. "They needed you pregnant before approaching me. A child that didn't exist yet had no value. But once you were carrying my genetic material, you became leverage. They waited until you were visibly committed, engaged, wedding planned, life settled. Then they would have taken you the day after the ceremony, when security was relaxed and you'd be emotional, vulnerable. And they would have contacted you," Evelyn finished, "shown you proof of the pregnancy." "Demanded what? Money?" "Territory, shipping routes, access to my distribution network." Marco's expression hardened. "And I would have given it to them. All of it. For a child I didn't know existed until 3 days ago." The rawness in his voice surprised her. This was a man who ran a criminal empire, who'd crashed her wedding with armed men who inhabited a world of violence she couldn't begin to understand. But in that moment, she heard something achingly human. "You would have surrendered everything," she said softly. "For a child you'd never met. It's my blood, my responsibility. He met her eyes. My son. You keep saying son. It could be a girl. The genetic profile indicated male, though the clinic's accuracy is now questionable. Something that might have been humor flickered across his face. Either way, it's my child. That means protection at any cost. Evelyn turned back to the files, needing to move past the intensity of the moment. The next section detailed the attack at the wedding, trajectories, weapons used, the tactical analysis of how 4 shooters had positioned themselves in the tree line. Professional work, according to the notes. Military-grade equipment. You knew they'd come, she said. I suspected. The timing was too convenient. Your wedding was public knowledge, published in the society pages. They'd been planning for weeks. I had 3 days. Marco moved to stand beside her, close enough that she caught his scent. Expensive cologne and something darker, more primal. I couldn't get to you alone. Your phone was monitored. Your apartment was watched. The wedding was my only option. So you became the villain in my fairy tale. I've been the villain in many stories, Dr. Carter. At least this time I saved someone. She looked up at him sharply. Is that what you tell yourself? That crashing my wedding with guns and taking me against my will is heroic? No, it's necessary. There's a difference. Marco's gaze didn't waver. I don't need you to like me. I don't need you to forgive me. I need you alive. The rest is negotiable. My freedom isn't negotiable. Your freedom is exactly what's being negotiated. By me keeping you safe until we eliminate the threat. By them wanting to take it entirely. He turned back to the desk, pulling out another folder. This is what we're dealing with. The final folder made her blood run cold. Photographs of a facility, concrete walls, barred windows, the kind of place that appeared in nightmares. According to the notes, this was where Castellano held people when he needed information or compliance. 2 of the other women from the clinic's program had been taken there. One had been returned to her family after a ransom was paid. The other's body had been found in the harbor 3 weeks later. Evelyn's hand moved to her stomach unconsciously. What happened to their babies? Miscarriage from stress. Both of them. Marco's voice was flat. They wanted leverage. They got corpses. The room tilted slightly. Evelyn gripped the edge of the desk, breathing through her nose the way she'd learned in yoga classes that now seemed to belong to a different lifetime. I need air, she managed. Marco didn't argue. He led her through glass doors onto a terrace that overlooked the ocean. The morning was cool, the breeze carrying salt and the cry of gulls. Evelyn braced her hands on the stone railing, letting the wind clear her head. This is insane, she said finally. All of it. The clinic, the conspiracy, the fact that I'm standing on a crime boss's terrace carrying his stolen child while people plot to kidnap me. This is insane. Yes. Stop agreeing with me. Would you prefer I lie? Evelyn laughed, a sharp, slightly hysterical sound. I don't know what I prefer anymore. 24 hours ago, I was getting married. I had a plan. I had control. You never had control, Marco said quietly. Neither did I. We were both played from the moment the clinic stole my genetic material. The only difference is I've accepted it. Accepted it? You crashed my wedding with an army. I made the best choice available in an impossible situation. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close but not touching. You think I wanted this? To be a father to a child I didn't choose? To be responsible for a woman I don't know? To have my enemies targeting someone innocent because of my blood? Then why not just let them take me? The question came out before she could stop it. Why risk your organization, your men, your life for someone who means nothing to you? Marco turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his dark eyes made her breath catch. Because you mean something to my son, and he means everything to me. The simple, devastating truth of it hung between them. I don't know you, Evelyn whispered. I don't trust you, but you saved my life yesterday. And I'll keep saving it until the threat is eliminated. How? By keeping me prisoner here? By keeping you alive here. Marco's expression softened slightly. This isn't a prison, Dr. Carter. You have freedom of movement within the estate. You can call your family on secure lines. You can work remotely if you choose. I know you have patients that depend on you. You can even leave if you're willing to accept the consequences. Which are death, probably within 48 hours of leaving this property. He said it without inflection, just fact. Castellano has people watching your apartment, your parents' house, your clinic. He has connections to federal agencies that could intercept any protective custody arrangement. The only place you're truly safe is here, with me, protected by men who answer to no government and no law except my word. Evelyn stared at the ocean, watching waves crash against rocks that had stood for millennia. Unchanging, unmovable. She felt like water, shapeless, trying to adapt to whatever container held her. "What's your plan?" she asked finally. "You can't keep me here forever." "No, but I can keep you here until we've dismantled Castellano's operation and eliminated everyone who knows about the pregnancy." Marco pulled out his phone, showing her what looked like an organizational chart. "We've already started. 3 of his lieutenants were arrested yesterday on unrelated weapons charges. 2 of his financial accounts were frozen this morning. The clinic's records are being subpoenaed by federal investigators." "You arranged all that in one day?" "I arranged all that in 3 hours after confirming your pregnancy was real." His smile was sharp, dangerous. "I'm very good at my job, Dr. Carter." "Your job being crime." "My job being protection. The crime is just the method." Evelyn turned back to the view, processing. Marco wasn't just reacting to the threat, he was dismantling it systematically. And he was doing it for a child he'd never planned, with a woman who was essentially a stranger. "The DNA analysis," she said abruptly. "I want independent verification, not just your records." "Done. I have a geneticist coming tomorrow who specializes in paternity testing. Completely independent, completely confidential." Marco pocketed his phone. "I want the same confirmation you do." "And if it turns out the clinic made a mistake? If you're not actually the father?" Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "Then you're still in danger and still under my protection until the threat is eliminated. The genetics change the personal stakes. They don't change the situation." "You'd still protect me?" "Yes." "Why?" Marco was quiet for a long moment, his gaze on the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. "Because you walked into that clinic hoping to take control of your life. You wanted a child on your terms, without the complications of relationship or expectation. That's not wrong, Dr. Carter. That's brave. And the fact that someone weaponized that bravery against both of us makes this my fight as much as yours." Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. Not breaking, but opening. This man, this criminal, this stranger, understood something about her that Richard never had, that her own mother had never grasped. "My name is Evelyn," she said quietly. "Marco." They stood in silence, 2 people bound by biology and conspiracy, watching the ocean and trying to figure out how to survive what came next. Finally, Marco spoke again. "I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty." "All right." "What were you planning to tell Richard? About the baby?" Evelyn exhaled slowly. "The truth. On the honeymoon, I was going to frame it as a happy surprise, something we could embrace together. He wanted children eventually. I thought he'd accept it. He would have left you the moment he learned the child wasn't his." The certainty in Marco's voice stung because it was probably true. Richard had wanted an heir with the right genetics, the right lineage. A child created in a lab with stolen DNA wouldn't fit that picture. "Maybe," she admitted. "But I would have had the baby. I would have built a life. I would have been fine." "You would have been alone." "I'm always alone, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. "Even in a room full of people. Even with a fiancé I was about to marry. That's why I went to the clinic in the first place. At least loneliness with a child has purpose." Marco turned to look at her fully, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "You're not alone now. I'm your prisoner. You're under my protection. There's a difference." "Is there?" Evelyn challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, I'm in a house I can't leave, surrounded by armed men, dependent on a criminal for my survival. That sounds like imprisonment to me." "Then let me show you the difference." Marco pulled out his phone again, typed something, and handed it to her. "Call your mother. Tell her you're safe. Tell her whatever you need to tell her." Evelyn stared at the phone. "This is a test. It's a choice. You can maintain contact with your family using secure lines. You can work remotely. You can have your belongings brought here. You can live, Evelyn. Just live here, where you're protected, until the threat is eliminated." She took the phone with trembling hands. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Evelyn? Oh my God, Evelyn, are you all right? They said you were safe, but wouldn't tell us where." "Mom, I'm fine." Evelyn's voice cracked despite her best effort. "I'm safe. I can't tell you where I am, but I'm protected and I'm not hurt." "What happened? That man at the wedding, the shooting?" Richard said. "Richard doesn't know anything." Evelyn cut her off gently. "Mom, listen to me. The situation is complicated, but I'm with people who can keep me safe. I need you to trust me." There was a long pause. Then, "This has to do with the baby, doesn't it?" Evelyn's eyes flew to Marco, who was carefully not listening, his gaze on the ocean. "How did you—" "I'm your mother. I've known for weeks. The way you've been holding yourself, the morning sickness you tried to hide, the fact that you chose a wedding dress with an empire waist." Her mother's voice softened. "I was waiting for you to tell me." Tears burned Evelyn's eyes. "I'm sorry. I should have told you. I should have—" "Hush. You're safe. That's all that matters right now." Her mother took a shaky breath. "But Evelyn, honey, are you really safe with these people?" Evelyn looked at Marco, this crime boss who'd destroyed her wedding and stolen her freedom and promised to protect a child he'd never wanted. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "I am." They talked for another 10 minutes, Evelyn reassuring her mother with half-truths and careful omissions. When she finally hung up, she felt both lighter and heavier. "Thank you," she said to Marco. "It's not a gift. It's basic decency." He took the phone back. "Your father will want to speak with you too. And there's the matter of your practice." "My patient." Evelyn's eyes widened. "God, I have surgery scheduled, appointments." "Your partner, Dr. Reeves, has been covering. I had someone contact the clinic with a family emergency excuse." Marco's expression was matter-of-fact. "But you can consult remotely if you choose. Video calls, treatment plans, whatever you need to maintain your work." "You thought of everything." "I told you, I'm very good at my job." Evelyn almost smiled. Then the exhaustion of the past 24 hours crashed over her in a wave that made her sway slightly. Marco's hand shot out, steadying her with a grip that was surprisingly gentle. "You should rest," he said. "I just woke up. You just survived a traumatic assault, fled your wedding, and processed information that would break most people. You're carrying a child and running on adrenaline." His dark eyes held hers. "Rest, Evelyn. Everything else can wait." She wanted to argue, wanted to demand more answers, more proof, more control over a situation that had spiraled so far beyond her grasp. But her body was betraying her, heavy and exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. "Fine," she whispered. "But tomorrow, I want to start working on this, not just hiding, actually fixing it." "Tomorrow," Marco agreed. "But today, you heal." He walked her back to her room, his presence solid and strangely comforting beside her. At the door, he paused. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I'm sorry this happened to you. You deserve the wedding you planned, the life you chose, the control you sought." "But instead I got you," Evelyn said. "Instead you got me." No apology in the words, just acknowledgement. She should have been terrified of him. This man who lived in violence, who commanded an empire built on crime, who'd taken her freedom in the name of protection. But standing in the doorway of her temporary prison, looking into dark eyes that held more complexity than she'd expected, Evelyn felt something else entirely. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. "Get some rest," Marco said again, and left before she could respond. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, one hand pressed to her abdomen where a tiny heartbeat pulsed in rhythm with her own. "Your father is a crime boss," she whispered to the baby, "and I have no idea what happens next." But for the first time since the SUVs crashed through her wedding, Evelyn felt something other than terror. She felt the first stirrings of purpose. Tomorrow, she'd start fighting back. Tonight, she'd rest. And somewhere between those 2 points, She'd figure out how to survive in a world she'd never chosen but could no longer escape. The ocean outside her window kept crashing against eternal rocks, and Evelyn closed her eyes to the sound of it, letting exhaustion finally claim her. The geneticist arrived exactly at 9 the next morning, accompanied by 2 of Marco's security team and enough medical equipment to run a small laboratory. Dr. Sarah Chen was petite, professional, and carried herself with the kind of competence that immediately put Evelyn at ease. "Dr. Carter, it's a pleasure," she said, extending her hand. "I understand we're here to establish paternity independently of the previous clinic's records." "That's right." Evelyn shook her hand, grateful for the straightforward approach. "I need to know the truth, real truth, not something filtered through people with agendas." "I completely understand. I've reviewed the files Mr. DeLuca provided, and I agree the chain of custody on the original samples is questionable at best." Dr. Chen set her case on the dining table that had been converted into a makeshift exam room. "We'll do this properly. Cheek swab from you, blood sample from Mr. DeLuca, and I'll run the analysis at my own lab with security protocols that would satisfy a criminal court." Marco appeared in the doorway, dressed in dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made him look less like a crime boss and more like someone who belonged in architectural magazines. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming on short notice." "Your associate was very persuasive about the urgency." Dr. Chen's tone was dry. "Shall we begin?" The process was quick and clinical. Evelyn provided her sample first, the swab running along the inside of her cheek, while Dr. Chen explained the testing methodology in terms that were both precise and accessible. Then it was Marco's turn, and Evelyn watched as he rolled up his sleeve without hesitation, offering his arm for the blood draw with the same calm he brought to everything else. "Results in 48 hours, Dr. Chen said, labeling the samples with codes rather than names. "I'll call you personally with the findings." After she left, escorted out by the same security detail that had brought her in, Evelyn found herself alone with Marco in the vast living room. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the ocean beyond into hammered silver. 48 hours, she said quietly. "Then we'll know for certain." "Does it change anything for you?" Marco asked. "If the test confirms what we already suspect?" Evelyn considered the question carefully. "It makes it real in a different way. Right now I can still tell myself this is all some terrible mistake, that maybe the clinic got it wrong, maybe the records were falsified, but if Dr. Chen confirms it—" She trailed off, one hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. "Then you're carrying my son, and everything that means—" "Everything that means," she echoed. "Which is what exactly? A lifetime connection to a man I don't know? A child caught between 2 worlds? What does this look like, Marco, if it's real?" He moved to the windows, his reflection ghosting against the glass. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've built my life around control, around knowing every angle and planning for every contingency. This?" He gestured between them. "This is uncharted territory. For both of us." "Yes." Marco turned to face her fully. "But I meant what I said yesterday. Genetics or not, you're under my protection until this threat is eliminated. And the child, our child, will want for nothing. Except a normal life." "Normal is overrated." The corner of his mouth lifted. "And from what I've read about you, Dr. Carter, you've never been particularly interested in normal either." Evelyn wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. Normal women didn't go to fertility clinics alone. Normal women didn't choose single motherhood over waiting for the right partner. Normal women probably didn't end up pregnant with a crime boss's stolen genetic material either, but that felt like a different category entirely. "I want to help," she said abruptly. "With the investigation, with finding Castellano, with all of it." Marco's expression shifted to something that might have been concern. "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary." Evelyn stepped closer, surprising herself with the force of her conviction. "This is my life that was violated, my body that was used without consent, my child that's being threatened. I'm not going to sit in this beautiful cage while you handle everything. You're a veterinarian, not an investigator. I'm a doctor who understands biological systems, chain of custody, medical records, and how to read people who are lying about their animals' symptoms." She crossed her arms. I can help, Marco. Let me help. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then he pulled out his phone and sent a quick text. Carlos will bring you the current investigation files. But if I bring you into this, you follow my rules. You don't take unnecessary risks, you don't go anywhere without security, and if I say something is too dangerous, you listen. I'm not a child. No, you're a pregnant woman carrying my heir in the middle of a war you didn't start. That makes you infinitely more valuable and infinitely more vulnerable. His voice was firm, but not unkind. I need your word, Evelyn. She wanted to bristle at the command in his tone, but she understood the logic behind it. Fine. You have my word. Carlos arrived within minutes, carrying a laptop and several tablets. He set everything up on the dining table, nodded to Marco, and left without speaking. The efficiency of it was almost eerie. Where do we start? Evelyn asked, pulling up a chair. Marco sat beside her, close enough that she caught his scent again. That mix of expensive cologne and something darker she was beginning to associate with safety, despite all logic. We start with the clinic's financial records. You understand medical billing, insurance codes, the kind of paperwork that would hide irregular transactions. He pulled up a spreadsheet that made Evelyn's eyes cross. Hundreds of entries, coded in ways that seemed deliberately obfuscating. But as she began to parse through them, patterns emerged. Payments that didn't match standard procedure codes. Deposits from shell corporations that had no business funding a fertility clinic. Transfers to offshore accounts. Here, she said, pointing. These charges are coded as genetic counseling, but they're 10 times the normal rate. And they're all going to the same account. Marco leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. That account belongs to a company called Helix Solutions. It's one of Castellano's fronts. So the clinic was paying him directly? Or he was paying them for services rendered? The direction of the flow matters less than the connection. Marco opened another file. We've been tracking Helix Solutions for months on unrelated business. They specialize in what they call biological asset acquisition, mostly industrial espionage, stealing proprietary genetic research, pharmaceutical formulas. But this? He gestured at the screen. This is a new application of old methods. Evelyn scrolled through more entries, her medical knowledge helping her identify which procedures were legitimate and which were likely covers for something else. These women, the other ones from the clinic, did any of them know? Did they have any idea what was being done to them? 2 discovered the switch during routine genetic testing in their second trimester. Both terminated immediately and disappeared. We're still trying to locate them. Marco's expression darkened. The others who carried to term, their situations varied. One mother and child are in witness protection. Another went back to the father listed in the clinic's false records. And then there were the 2 that Castellanos people took. The ones who miscarried. Yes. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of it. She'd been number 9. Lucky number 9, who'd had Marco show up in time. What happened to Dr. Weston, the clinic director? Vanished. Marco pulled up a new file. Surveillance photos, travel records, digital footprints that ended abruptly 3 days after Evelyn's wedding. She cleared out her accounts, abandoned her apartment, and disappeared. Either Castellanos protecting her, or she's running from him. Either way, she's a ghost. People can't just disappear in the modern world. People with resources and criminal connections absolutely can. Marco's smile was grim. I should know. I've made several people disappear over the years. The casual admission should have horrified her. Instead, Evelyn found herself asking, did they deserve it? Every single one. They worked through the afternoon, Evelyn identifying irregularities in the medical records while Marco connected them to his broader investigation. She discovered that the clinic had been running the scheme for nearly 3 years, starting small with corporate espionage and expanding into human leverage. The sophistication was staggering, every step designed to be plausibly deniable, every transaction routed through layers of legitimate business. They were good, Evelyn said finally, pushing back from the laptop to rub her eyes. Whoever designed this was very, very good. Dr. Weston has a PhD in genetics and an MBA from Wharton. She knew exactly what she was doing. Marco stood, stretching muscles that had been still for hours. But good doesn't mean perfect. They made mistakes. Like what? Like keeping records at all. Pride, probably. Documentation of their genius. He moved to the windows, his posture less relaxed than it had been. And like underestimating what I'd do when I found out. Something in his tone made Evelyn's pulse quicken. What have you done, Marco? What was necessary? He turned to face her. Castellano lost 2 more of his operations this morning. His cocaine distribution in Baltimore and his money laundering operation in Atlantic City. Federal raids, completely coincidental. The way he said coincidental made it clear nothing about it was chance. He's losing millions of dollars every day. Eventually, he'll make a mistake out of desperation. And then we end this. The finality in his voice was absolute. Evelyn stood, moving to join him at the window. When you say end this, you mean kill him. I mean eliminate the threat permanently. Whether that requires his death depends on him. That's a very diplomatic way of saying yes. Marco's expression didn't change. I told you what I am, Evelyn. I'm not a good man. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who protects what's mine through whatever means necessary. If that makes you uncomfortable, it should make me uncomfortable, she interrupted. It should terrify me. But somehow it doesn't. Why is that? Maybe because you understand that the world isn't as clean as we're taught to believe. That sometimes the only thing standing between safety and chaos is someone willing to get their hands bloody. Evelyn looked down at her own hands, a surgeon's hands, steady and skilled. How many times had she made life or death decisions in operating rooms? How many animals had she saved through controlled violence, cutting into flesh to repair what was broken? The comparison wasn't perfect, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. My ex-boyfriend, the one my family hated, he was a Marine, she said quietly. He'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan. He had nightmares, scars, this haunted look sometimes that never quite went away. My mother said he was damaged. My father said he was dangerous. But I saw someone who'd done terrible things so that people like me could live in comfortable ignorance. What happened to him? He died. IED in Kandahar. I got the notification 3 days before I was supposed to fly out to visit him at base. Evelyn's voice was steady, despite the old pain. I went to the fertility clinic 6 months after his funeral. I told myself it was about taking control of my future. But really, I was trying to create something that couldn't be taken away by violence, or chance, or fate. And instead, you created exactly that. The irony isn't lost on me. She turned to look at Marco fully. But here's the thing, you're not that different from him, from Jake. You both live in a world where violence is currency and protection requires force. The only difference is legality, and frankly, I'm not sure that matters as much as I used to think it did. Marco's expression shifted to something that looked almost like surprise. You're comparing me to someone you loved? I'm comparing you to someone who understood that the world has sharp edges, and sometimes you have to be sharper to survive. Evelyn held his gaze. I don't love you, Marco. I barely know you, but I'm starting to understand you. And that's more than I can say for the man I almost married. Before Marco could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire posture changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. Alert. Ready. What is it? Evelyn asked. We have movement. Castellano's people are on the move. Marco was already texting rapid-fire instructions. Carlos just confirmed 3 vehicles heading north from New York. Could be toward the safe house in Connecticut. Could be a feint. Either way, the lights went out. Not just in the house. Everywhere. The entire estate plunged into darkness as the sun set behind clouds that had moved in without either of them noticing. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's not coincidental, Evelyn said, her heart hammering. No. Marco's hand went to his waistband, coming up with a weapon that hadn't been visible before. That's an attack. The next sound was the sharp crack of gunfire from somewhere outside. Then more, a staccato rhythm that sent pure adrenaline flooding through Evelyn's system. Marco grabbed her wrist and pulled her away from the windows. Basement now, he commanded. What about now, Evelyn? They ran. The house that had seemed so peaceful that morning transformed into a battlefield in seconds. Marco's men appeared from nowhere, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Someone shouted in Italian. More gunfire, closer this time. the sharp sound of breaking glass. Marco pulled Evelyn through a door she'd never noticed before, downstairs that descended into darkness. The emergency lighting barely penetrated this deep. At the bottom was a heavy steel door with a biometric lock. Marco pressed his thumb to it, and the door swung open with a hydraulic hiss. "Inside," he ordered. Evelyn stumbled into what was clearly a panic room. Reinforced walls, security monitors, supplies stacked neatly on shelves. The door began to close behind her, and she realized with sudden horror that Marco wasn't following. "Wait, you're not coming? I can't lead from a bunker." Marco's expression was grim but determined. "You'll be safe here. The door only opens from inside once it's sealed, and the walls are rated against explosives. Stay down, stay quiet, and wait for me to come back." "Marco, I will come back." He said it with such certainty that she almost believed him. "I promise." The door sealed shut with a sound like a tomb closing. Evelyn stood in the dim emergency lighting of the panic room, her breath coming in short gasps. Above her, muffled by layers of concrete and steel, she could hear the battle raging. Gunfire, shouting. What might have been an explosion. She moved to the security monitors mounted on one wall. 6 screens showed different angles of the estate, and what she saw made her stomach drop. At least a dozen men in tactical gear were assaulting the property from multiple directions. Marco's security team was fighting back, but they were outnumbered. She watched one of Marco's men, she thought it might be Carlos, take a hit and go down. "Oh God," she whispered. On another monitor, she found Marco. He was coordinating the defense from behind cover near the main entrance, weapon in hand, giving orders with the calm precision of someone who'd done this before. Many times before. As she watched, he leaned out and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. One of the attacking men fell. This was his world. Violence and strategy and life-or-death decisions made in split seconds. And he'd chosen to step into it while locking her in safety. Evelyn's hand moved to her stomach. The baby. She had to think about the baby. Had to stay calm, stay safe, exactly as Marco had ordered, but watching the battle unfold on silent monitors while she hid underground felt like the worst kind of helplessness. Minutes passed like hours. The assault seemed to be intensifying. More attackers appeared on the perimeter cameras. Reinforcements, she realized with dawning horror. This wasn't a raid. It was a full-scale assault meant to overwhelm Marco's defenses through sheer numbers. On the monitor showing the main entrance, Marco was forced to fall back. She watched him grab a wounded man and haul him toward cover, exposing himself to enemy fire for those crucial seconds. Her heart stopped until he made it safely behind a stone pillar. "Don't be stupid," she said to the screen. "Don't be a hero." But he was both of those things, she was realizing. Stupid and heroic in ways that probably kept him alive in this brutal world, but might also get him killed protecting people who depended on him. Like her. Like the baby. The thought crystallized with sudden, terrible clarity. If Marco died out there, she was trapped in this panic room with no way out. The attackers would eventually breach the house, and even the strongest door couldn't hold forever. She and the baby would be taken, exactly as Castellano had planned from the beginning. Marco had to survive. Not just for himself, but for them. Evelyn pressed her hand against the cold steel of the door, as if she could somehow transmit strength through metal and concrete to the man fighting for all their lives on the other side. On the monitors, the battle raged. Marco's team was down to maybe 6 men, fighting against twice that many attackers. But they were professionals, and they were fighting for their boss. Slowly, methodically, they began to turn the tide. Attackers fell. Others retreated to regroup. Then she saw it. One of the attackers breaking away from the main assault, moving with purpose toward the house's west wing. He had something in his hand that looked like a shaped charge, heading for what Evelyn recognized as the structural support wall closest to the basement, closest to her. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no!" The explosion, when it came, was massive. The panic room shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The monitors went black for a heartbeat before backup power kicked in. Evelyn was thrown against the wall, the impact driving the air from her lungs. She curled instinctively around her stomach, protecting what mattered most. When the world stopped shaking, she pushed herself up on trembling arms. The monitors flickered back to life. The west wing was partially collapsed. And the door to the panic room, the door that was supposed to be impenetrable, had a hairline crack running through its seal. Evelyn's medical training kicked in. She assessed herself quickly, bruised, shaken, but functional. No bleeding, no sharp pains that would indicate injury to the pregnancy. The baby was fine, she was fine, but the seal was broken. On the monitors, chaos had erupted. Marco's men were converging on the West Wing breach. She found Marco on another camera, and her heart lurched. He was running toward the basement stairs, weapon drawn, his expression absolutely murderous. He was coming for her, and the attackers knew it. She watched two men peel off from the assault to intercept him. Marco didn't slow down. He took the first man out with 2 shots, barely breaking stride. The second got closer, and they went hand to hand. Marco fought like something feral, all controlled violence and lethal precision. The attacker went down hard. Then Marco was at the basement door, and Evelyn could hear his voice through the damaged seal. "Evelyn, answer me!" "I'm here," she called back. "I'm okay." The relief in his voice was palpable even through steel and concrete. "The seal is compromised. I'm opening the door, but I need you to stay back. There could be—" He didn't finish the sentence because that's when the second wave hit. Evelyn watched on the monitors as what looked like another dozen men breached the perimeter. Fresh attackers, heavily armed, moving with military coordination. Marco's remaining team was exhausted, low on ammunition, fighting on pure determination. "Marco, there's more of them," Evelyn shouted through the crack. "Another wave, northeast perimeter." She heard him curse viciously in Italian. Then his voice came back, strained but focused. "I need you to listen very carefully. The door's biometric lock is damaged. I'm going to manually override it, but that takes time. Can you see the monitors from where you are?" "Yes." "Tell me what you see. Be my eyes." Evelyn forced herself to breathe, to think. She scanned the monitors, assessing the tactical situation the way she imagined Marco would. 6 attackers coming through the north garden, 4 more flanking from the east. Your men are pinned down by the main entrance. Ammunition status? How would I know that? Count their shots. Estimate. She focused on one monitor showing 2 of Marco's men, counted the fire rate. Maybe 30 seconds of sustained fire before they're dry? Close enough. She heard him shouting orders in Italian, then back to her. "Keep watching. Tell me about movement toward the basement." Evelyn's eyes darted between screens. 2 men broke off from the east group. They're heading for the West Wing breach. 30 seconds out. "I need 60 seconds on this door." "You don't have 60 seconds. Then I need you to be ready to run when it opens." Before Evelyn could respond, she saw movement on the monitor showing the basement stairs. 2 attackers descending toward the panic room. Toward Marco, who was focused on the door mechanism and wouldn't see them until it was too late. "Behind you!" she screamed. "Marco, on the stairs!" She watched him spin, weapon coming up. The first attacker went down. The second got off a shot that sparked against the steel door inches from where Marco had been standing a moment before. Marco returned fire, and the second attacker collapsed. But the distraction had cost him. More attackers were pouring into the breach. Marco couldn't defend the door and manually override the lock at the same time. "Go!" Evelyn shouted. "Marco, go defend your house. I'm safe in here." "Like hell you are?" His voice was raw. "That seal is broken, and there are men with explosives upstairs. I'm getting you out and we're ending this." "You can't do both." "Watch me." What happened next would later play in Evelyn's memory, like something out of an action film, except the blood was real and the stakes were life or death. Marco positioned himself between the basement entrance and the panic room door, using what little cover existed. He fired with devastating accuracy. 1 shot, 1 target, no wasted ammunition. Men fell. Others retreated. But they kept coming. Evelyn watched him reload twice, his hands moving with practiced efficiency even under fire. She watched him take a hit to his shoulder. She saw the impact, saw him grunt and stumble. But he didn't go down. Didn't stop. Just kept fighting with a determination that was either inspiring or terrifying, and Evelyn couldn't decide which. "Marco, you're hit!" "Flesh wound. Stay focused." She almost laughed hysterically at the absurdity. Flesh wound. Like this was some action movie and not a very real assault that might end with both of them dead. But then something changed. Through the monitors, Evelyn saw new vehicles approaching, 3 black SUVs that she recognized from her own kidnapping. Reinforcements. Marco's reinforcements. The men who poured out moved with the same lethal efficiency as Marco's original team, fresh weapons, fresh ammunition, and absolute fury at finding their boss under siege. The tide turned in seconds. Attackers who'd been advancing were suddenly retreating, caught between Marco's team at the house and the newcomers cutting off their escape. The gunfire intensified for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes. Then it began to fade. The attackers were falling back, dragging their wounded, disappearing into the woods beyond the estate. Finally, silence, broken only by the sound of men calling all clear in Italian. "Evelyn," Marco's voice through the door was rough with exhaustion. "I'm opening it now. Stand back." The door swung open with a hydraulic whine. Marco stood in the doorway, backlit by emergency lights, blood seeping through his shirt at the shoulder. His weapon was still in his hand, his expression still battle-hard. But when his eyes found her, something in them softened. "You're all right," he said. Not a question, a statement he needed to confirm visually. "You're bleeding," Evelyn countered, already moving toward him with a doctor's instinct. "I've had worse." "That's not reassuring." She reached him, her hands already assessing the wound with professional competence despite her shaking fingers. "Bullet went through. You need stitches and antibiotics." Later, Marco caught her hand, stopping her examination. "Are you hurt?" "The explosion? I'm fine. The baby's fine." Evelyn met his eyes. "But you're not fine, and you're going into shock if we don't stop that bleeding." "Bosses don't go into shock. Doctors don't care about your ego." She pulled free and pressed her hands against the wound, applying pressure. Marco hissed but didn't pull away. "You need medical attention, real medical attention. After we secure the perimeter." "Marco, after." His voice was firm. "There could be stragglers. Casualties among my men need triage. The house needs to be cleared, then you can play doctor." Evelyn wanted to argue, but she understood the logic. She was safe. He was functional. His team came first. It was the kind of leadership that explained why men would die for him. Carlos appeared at the basement entrance, looking battered but upright. "Boss, we have 3 confirmed kills, 2 wounded ours, 5 wounded theirs. The rest scattered, no secondary assault detected." "Prisoners?" Marco asked. 2. They're secured in the garage." "Good." Marco's expression was grim satisfaction. "I'll want to talk to them." Carlos's eyes flickered to where Evelyn was still pressing against Marco's wound. "Sir, you need—" "I know what I need, Carlos. Status report first. Then Dr. Carter can patch me up." The next hour was controlled chaos. Evelyn found herself drafted into medical duty, using her veterinary training to treat human wounds that weren't all that different from the animals she was used to. She worked on Marco's men in the kitchen that had been converted to a triage station, cleaning wounds, stitching lacerations, administering antibiotics from supplies that suggested Marco kept a full medical kit on hand for exactly these situations. She saved Marco for last, partially because he refused treatment until his men were handled, partially because she needed her hands to stop shaking before she could work on him properly. When it was finally his turn, she sat him down in one of the kitchen chairs and cut away his blood-soaked shirt. The wound was clean, through and through, just as she'd thought. No major vessels hit, no bone damage. Lucky, in the grand scheme of things. "This is going to hurt," she warned, threading a curved needle with suture material. "I've been shot before." Somehow that doesn't surprise me. Evelyn began to stitch, her hands steady now in the familiar ritual of repair. "How many times?" 5. 6 if you count a graze that didn't really qualify. "You live a dangerous life." "I live the only life I know." Marco watched her work with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement. "You're good at this." "I'm a surgeon, just usually for different species." "The principles are the same." "The principles are identical." Evelyn tied off the first stitch, started the second. "Tissue is tissue, trauma is trauma. The goal is always to repair what's broken and prevent infection." Philosophical for a doctor. "I learned from my father. He used to say that healing is the same whether you're working on a Senator's Prize Labrador or a shelter mutt. The value isn't in the patient, it's in the act of preservation." Your father sounds wise. He is. About animals, anyway. People he's less skilled with. Evelyn focused on her work, the rhythmic motion of needle and thread soothing in its familiarity. He'll probably have a heart attack when he finds out about all this. You planning to tell him? I don't know yet. Depends on whether we survive long enough to have that conversation. Marco's hand came up to catch her wrist, gentle but firm. She looked up to find his dark eyes serious. We will survive this, Evelyn. Tonight was bad, but it was also a message. Castellano threw everything he could at us and failed. He's desperate now, and desperate men make fatal mistakes. How many people died tonight? She asked quietly. 3 of the attackers. 1 of mine. Marco's expression was carved from stone. Roberto. He'd been with me for 6 years, had a wife and daughter in Providence. I'm sorry. So am I. But this is the world I chose, the world I built. He released her wrist. Keep going. This conversation can wait until I'm not bleeding on your surgical field. Evelyn returned to her work, finishing the stitches with care that had nothing to do with professional pride and everything to do with the man sitting still beneath her hands. When she was done, she bandaged the wound and stepped back to assess. You'll need antibiotics for a week. Keep it clean and dry. No strenuous activity for at least 48 hours. Define strenuous. Anything that makes you think this might tear my stitches. Marco's mouth quirked. That eliminates most of my daily activities. Then adjust your daily activities. Evelyn started cleaning up the medical supplies, needing to keep her hands busy. You scared me tonight. I know. You could have died. Yes. And you did it anyway. Fought your way to that panic room when you could have evacuated, could have saved yourself. I couldn't. Marco stood, testing the range of motion in his injured shoulder with a wince. Because you were in there, you and my son. The casual possessiveness in those words should have irritated her. Instead, they settled something that had been restless in her chest since the door had sealed shut. Thank you, she said quietly, for coming back. Always. Marco's gaze was steady. I told you I'd protect you. That wasn't conditional on convenience or safety. Before Evelyn could respond, Carlos appeared in the doorway. Boss, the prisoners are ready for questioning. Marco's expression shifted immediately, softer concern replaced by cold calculation. Good. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Marco, Evelyn said carefully, what are you going to do to them? Ask questions, get answers. His tone was matter of fact. And if they don't answer? Then I'll ask more persuasively. She should have been horrified, should have protested, should have reminded him about laws and rights and civilized behavior, but she'd just watched men storm this house trying to kill everyone inside, trying to kill her, trying to take her baby. Make them talk, she said instead. Find out who sent them. Find out how to stop this. Marco studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Stay here. This part you don't need to see. I'm coming with you. Evelyn, I said I wanted to help. I said I wouldn't sit in a cage while you handled everything. She met his eyes with determination she didn't entirely feel but committed to completely. Those men came here to kidnap me. To use my baby as a weapon. I deserve to face them. This isn't a medical procedure. It's going to be ugly. Then it's ugly, but I'm coming. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then something like respect crossed his features. All right. But you stay behind me, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood? Understood. They walked through the damaged house together, past walls with bullet holes and floors stained with blood. The evidence of violence was everywhere, but so was the evidence of Marco's power, his men moving efficiently to restore order, to repair what could be fixed, to remove what couldn't. The garage had been converted into an interrogation room. 2 men sat bound to chairs, both injured, both radiating defiance even through obvious pain. They looked young, Evelyn thought, mid-20s at most. Someone's son, someone's brother, someone's weapon. Marco's entire demeanor changed as he entered the room. The man who'd sat patiently for stitches, who'd spoken gently about protection and promises, vanished. In his place was something colder, harder. The crime boss she'd seen in files but hadn't fully understood until this moment. Gentlemen, Marco said pleasantly, welcome to my home. I apologize for the lack of hospitality, but you did try to kill me tonight, so I'm sure you'll understand. Neither prisoner spoke. Marco circled them slowly, hands clasped behind his back despite the freshly stitched shoulder. Here's how this works. You answer my questions truthfully and quickly, and you leave here alive. You lie, you stall, you waste my time, and you don't. He stopped in front of the first prisoner. Who sent you? Silence. Marco nodded to Carlos, who stepped forward with something that Evelyn couldn't quite see. Whatever he did made the prisoner gasp in pain. Who sent you? Marco asked again, his voice still pleasant. Castellano, the prisoner gasped out. Victor Castellano. Good start. Where is he now? I don't know, man. I swear. Another gesture from Marco. More pain. Evelyn forced herself not to look away, not to show weakness. This was the world she'd entered. This was the price of protection. Where is he? Connecticut. He has a place in Greenwich, private estate under a shell company. The words tumbled out in a rush. That's all I know, I swear. They don't tell us everything. What was the plan tonight? Breach the house, take the woman, get out fast before your reinforcements arrived. We had 30 minutes to execute. Except you didn't know about my early warning system, Marco said, or the fact that my reinforcements were already in position. The prisoner's eyes widened. You knew we were coming? I've known you were coming since you left New York. I've been tracking Castellano's movements for 3 days. Marco's smile was sharp. This was always a trap. I just needed to see how far he'd go. Evelyn felt something cold settle in her stomach. Marco had known, had prepared, had used the assault as an opportunity to gather intelligence while protecting his home. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was exactly the kind of three-dimensional thinking that made him so dangerous. The second prisoner, watching his companion break, suddenly spoke. He's going to kill you, DeLuca. You and that bitch and the baby. Castellano doesn't stop. He doesn't quit. You just made this personal. Marco moved faster than Evelyn could track. One moment he was standing across the room, the next his hand was wrapped around the second prisoner's throat. My child was already personal, he said softly. This is now survival, his or mine, and I've survived worse men than Victor Castellano. He released the prisoner, who gasped for air, eyes watering. Take them to the secure location, Marco ordered Carlos. Full medical treatment, then holding until we decide what to do with them. Boss, Carlos started. I know, but we're not murderers without cause. They followed orders. It's the man giving the orders I want. Carlos nodded and gestured for his men to remove the prisoners. Within moments, the garage was empty except for Evelyn and Marco. Greenwich, Connecticut, Evelyn said quietly. That's what, 90 minutes from here? In normal traffic. Less if you don't care about speed limits. You're going after him. Yes. Marco turned to face her. But not tonight. Tonight we recover, we regroup. We make sure every detail is perfect because we only get one chance at this. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm night. When you go after him, what happens to me? You stay here, protected by every man I can spare. And if something goes wrong? If you don't come back? Marco crossed the space between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the violence they'd just witnessed. I'm coming back, Evelyn. I swear to you on my life, on my family's name, on every oath that means anything in my world, I'm coming back to you and our son. The certainty in his voice, the intensity in his dark eyes, made something crack open in Evelyn's chest. This man was a criminal, a killer, someone who lived in violence and commanded through fear. But he was also the only person who'd fought for her when everyone else had run. Who'd bled to keep her safe, who'd promised to protect a child he'd never wanted but claimed completely the moment he knew it existed. I believe you, she whispered, and terrifyingly, impossibly, she did. The aftermath of the assault settled over the estate like ash after a fire. Evelyn stood at the windows of her room as dawn broke over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that seemed obscene after the violence of the previous night. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized, still in borrowed clothes, stained with other people's blood, hair tangled, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, and something harder that hadn't been there before. She'd crossed a line last night, watched Marco interrogate prisoners with methods that would horrify her colleagues, her family, everyone she'd been before an armored SUV crashed through her wedding. And instead of being horrified herself, she'd felt something darker: satisfaction. The men who'd come to kidnap her, to weaponize her child, had gotten less than they deserved. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Marco entered without waiting for permission, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He moved stiffly, favoring his injured shoulder despite his best efforts to hide it. "You should be resting," Evelyn said. "So should you." He handed her one of the cups, decaf, she knew without asking. "But I doubt either of us has slept." "No." She accepted the coffee, grateful for the warmth against her palms. "I keep seeing it, the assault, the blood. Your face when you were fighting to get to that panic room." Marco moved to stand beside her at the window, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I'm sorry you had to see that side of my world." "Are you? Because I think you needed me to see it, to understand exactly what kind of life you live." "Maybe." He was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise. "Or maybe I needed you to see what I'm willing to do to protect you, to understand that this isn't theoretical anymore. The threat is real, the danger is immediate, and the only way through is forward." Forward meaning Greenwich. Yes. Evelyn sipped her coffee, tasting bitterness and exhaustion. "When?" "2 days. 3 at most. I need time to gather intelligence, position my people, ensure every angle is covered." Marco's profile was carved in stone against the dawn light. "Castellano will be expecting retaliation after last night. He'll fortify his position, increase security. But he'll also be arrogant. He threw everything at us and failed. That kind of defeat breeds overconfidence in men like him." "Men like you too?" Marco's mouth quirked. "I prefer to think I've learned from my defeats. It's what's kept me alive this long." "How long is that exactly?" Evelyn realized she knew almost nothing about his past, his history, how he'd become the man standing next to her. "How old are you?" 38, old enough to have made every mistake possible in this business. Young enough to still believe I can win. "And before this business? Before you were Marco De Luca, crime boss, an accidental father?" He was silent long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I was Marco De Luca, immigrant son and college dropout. My father ran a shipping business. Legitimate, mostly. He had connections to the families but tried to stay clean. It didn't matter. When I was 20, a rival organization decided his territory was worth taking. They killed him, killed my uncle, burned our warehouse, left my mother and sisters with nothing." Evelyn heard the weight of old grief in his voice. "What did you do?" "What any stupid, angry 20-year-old would do. I went to war." Marco's jaw tightened. "I had no training, no connections, no plan. Just rage and a gun I barely knew how to use. I should have died in the first week, but I got lucky. Caught the attention of a man named Salvatore Marchetti. He saw something in me. Stupidity, probably, but also determination. He took me in, taught me the business, the real business. How to be a criminal. How to survive in a world that eats the weak and spits out the broken." Marco turned to face her fully. "Sal taught me that power isn't about violence. It's about leverage, information, knowing when to push and when to pull back. He built an empire by being smarter than everyone else, not just more brutal. When he died 5 years ago, he left most of it to me." "Most?" "His biological son got the legitimate operations. I got everything else." There was no bitterness in Marco's voice, just acceptance. Sal knew his son didn't have the stomach for this life, but he also knew I'd thrive in it. He was right. Evelyn absorbed this, trying to reconcile the young man seeking revenge with the calculated leader who'd orchestrated last night's defense. "Do you ever regret it? The path you chose?" "Every day." The honesty in his answer surprised her. "I regret the things I've done, the people I've hurt, the life I can't have because of the choices I made at 20. But regret doesn't change reality. This is who I am now. This is the world I built. And now you're bringing a child into it." "Yes." Marco's hand moved unconsciously toward her stomach, stopping just short of touching. "Which is why I need to end this before he's born. Castellano, the clinic conspiracy. Everyone involved. I need them gone so that my son can grow up without this hanging over him." "Your son," Evelyn repeated softly. "You keep saying that with such certainty, like you've already met him." "In my mind, I have. Dark hair like mine. Your eyes, probably. Stubborn as hell. Definitely." Something that might have been tenderness crossed Marco's features. "I've thought about nothing else since I found out. What kind of father I'd be. Whether I'm capable of raising someone to be better than me, whether he'll hate me for the life I've lived." The vulnerability in his admission made Evelyn's throat tight. "He won't hate you. Not if you're there. Not if you protect him and love him and give him the choice you never had." The choice between legitimate life and this one? The choice to be whoever he wants to be, regardless of genetics or expectation or the sins of his father. She finally gave in to the impulse and placed her hand over his, pressing it gently against where the baby grew. "He's going to know you fought for him before he was even born. That has to count for something." Marco's hand flattened against her stomach, warm and solid. For a moment they stood like that, connected by touch and promise and the impossible situation that had brought them together. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the intimacy. Marco pulled back, checking the screen. His expression shifted immediately to something alert and focused. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. "Dr. Chen, the paternity results are ready." The words hung between them, heavy with implications. In the chaos of the assault and its aftermath, Evelyn had almost forgotten about the genetic testing. But now the moment was here, and suddenly she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "That was fast," she said. "She said 48 hours. I may have impressed upon her the urgency of the situation. Marco was already texting back. "She can deliver the results in person within the hour, if we're ready." "Are we?" Evelyn met his eyes. "Ready, I mean. Because once we know for certain, everything changes." "Everything already changed when I walked into your wedding." Marco's voice was gentle but firm. "The genetics just confirm what we both already know in our gut." He was right. Evelyn had felt it from the moment she saw Marco's face in the garden, even before he'd spoken. Some deep primal recognition that this man was connected to the life inside her in ways that had nothing to do with choice and everything to do with biology. "All right," she said quietly. "Tell her to come, doctor." Chen arrived exactly 60 minutes later, professional and precise as before. She set up in the same dining room they'd used for the sample collection, her expression carefully neutral. "Before I share the results," she said, "I want to confirm that both of you understand what these findings mean legally and personally. This is paternity confirmation for a pregnancy that was initiated without either party's consent through what appears to be criminal misconduct. The implications are significant." "We understand," Marco said. "And you both still want to proceed with full disclosure?" "Yes," Evelyn answered, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "We need to know the truth." Dr. Chen nodded and opened her tablet, angling it so both of them could see the screen. Graphs and charts filled the display, genetic markers highlighted and compared with the precision of hard science. "The results are conclusive," Dr. Chen said. "Based on analysis of 13 independent genetic markers, Mr. DeLuca is the biological father of the fetus currently carried by Dr. Carter. Probability of paternity is 99.97%, which is as certain as genetic science can determine." The word settled over the room like a benediction. Or a curse. Evelyn couldn't decide which. "You're sure," she said, even though the data was right there in front of her. "Completely sure." "As sure as I can be without comparing to the fetus directly, which I wouldn't recommend at this stage of pregnancy given the risks." Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, I know this wasn't the conception either of you chose, but biologically, scientifically, this child is yours. Both of yours." Marco was very still beside her. Evelyn glanced at his face and saw something raw there, quickly suppressed. Not shock. He'd known, just as she had. But confirmation was different from suspicion. Confirmation made it real in ways that changed everything. "Thank you, Dr. Chen," Marco said quietly. "I appreciate your discretion and professionalism." "Of course." Dr. Chen packed up her equipment efficiently. "I'll send the full report to your secure server. If either of you has questions as the pregnancy progresses, I'm available for consultation. And Dr. Carter, you should establish prenatal care with an obstetrician soon. I can provide referrals to specialists who understand the need for privacy. I'd appreciate that, Evelyn managed. After Dr. Chen left, escorted out by the same security team that had brought her in, Evelyn and Marco sat in silence at the dining table. The weight of genetic certainty pressed down like physical force. So, Evelyn said finally, it's real. It was always real. Marco's voice was rough. But yes, now it's confirmed. How do you feel? Terrified, determined, furious at the people who did this to us. He turned to look at her, and strangely grateful, which makes no sense given the circumstances. Grateful? That if someone was going to violate your autonomy and weaponize your pregnancy, at least the child is actually mine. At least that part wasn't a lie. Marco's hand clenched on the table. Does that make me a terrible person? To be grateful for something born from violation? Evelyn considered the question carefully. I think it makes you human. And I think I understand because I feel the same way. I'm angry about how this happened, violated by what was done to my body without consent. But I can't regret the pregnancy itself, can't regret this baby, even though everything about how he was conceived was wrong. He, Marco repeated, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. You're sure it's a boy? You're the one who's been saying son from the beginning. Because the genetic profile indicated male. But you're his mother. You'd know. Evelyn pressed her hand to her still flat stomach. I don't know anything except that he exists, that he's growing, that he's half me and half you, created without our permission to serve someone else's agenda. She met Marco's eyes. And that I'll do anything to keep him safe. We, Marco corrected gently, will do anything. You're not alone in this anymore, Evelyn. The use of her name, the sincerity in his voice, made something shift in her chest. They'd been bound by biology and conspiracy before, but this felt different. This felt like choice. Partners, she said, in protecting him. Partners. Marco extended his hand across the table. Evelyn took it, their fingers interlacing in a grip that felt like a promise. So, what now? We have confirmation. We know Castellano is in Greenwich. What's the next step? Now we finish what he started. Marco's expression hardened. We take the fight to him. We end this so thoroughly that no one ever threatens our son again. When? Tomorrow night. I have people gathering intelligence on his Greenwich estate as we speak. Security layout, guard rotations, entry points. By this time tomorrow, we'll know everything we need to move. Evelyn's pulse quickened. And you're going personally. I have to. This is my fight, my responsibility. Our fight, she corrected, using his own words. Our son, our responsibility. You're not coming. Marco's tone brooked no argument. You're staying here where it's safe. We already established this house isn't safe. Your panic room door got cracked like an egg last night. Which is why I'm reinforcing security, doubling the guard, making sure nothing gets within a mile of you while I'm gone. Marco squeezed her hand. I need to know you're protected, Evelyn. I can't focus on what needs to be done if I'm worried about you. And I can't sit here wondering if you're alive or dead while you're out there risking everything. Then don't wonder. Trust. His dark eyes held hers. Trust that I'm very good at what I do. Trust that I've survived worse odds. Trust that I have every reason in the world to come back alive. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to demand he take her along, wanted to do something other than wait helplessly while he walked into danger. But she understood the logic. She was a liability in combat, not an asset, and the baby made her vulnerable in ways that could compromise whatever Marco had planned. Fine, she said reluctantly, but I want updates, constant updates. And if something goes wrong, Carlos has instructions to get you to a safe location and keep you there until the situation stabilizes. Marco's expression was grim. He also has my will, instructions for accessing my accounts, and contacts who can help you disappear if necessary. The casual discussion of his potential death made Evelyn's stomach clench. You're talking like you expect to die. I'm talking like a man who plans for every contingency. Marco stood, pulling her up with him. But I don't plan to die, Evelyn. I plan to eliminate Victor Castellano and everyone who helped him violate you. I plan to destroy the clinic's records and the conspiracy behind it, and then I plan to come home to you and our son. The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, should have been arrogant. Instead, it was strangely comforting. I'm going to hold you to that, Evelyn said. Good. Marco's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone in a gesture that felt intimate despite its gentleness. Because I always keep my promises. For a moment they stood like that, close enough that Evelyn could feel the heat of his body, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Then Marco stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself. I need to meet with my team. Plan the operation. You should rest. I'm tired of resting. I'm tired of being helpless. Evelyn crossed her arms. Let me help with something. Anything. I can review the intelligence, look for patterns, use my medical knowledge. You can do all of that, Marco interrupted. But after you eat something and take your prenatal vitamins, doctor's orders. Despite everything, Evelyn almost smiled. You're bossy. I'm careful with what matters to me. He turned toward the door, then paused. Maria will bring you lunch in an hour. After that, Carlos will set you up with access to our intelligence files. But Evelyn? Yes? Don't do anything stupid. Don't try to help in ways that put you at risk. Because if something happens to you or the baby while I'm preparing to end this, I will burn the entire world down. Understood? The raw intensity in his voice made her breath catch. Understood. Marco left and Evelyn sank back into her chair, processing everything that had happened in the past hour. Genetic confirmation, partnership, the promise of violence to come. She should call her mother, should check in with her practice, should do something normal to anchor herself to the life she'd had before all this. But that life felt impossibly distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. Instead, she found herself pulling out the tablet Carlos had left behind, opening the files on Castellano's Greenwich estate. If Marco was going into battle tomorrow night, she'd make damn sure he had every piece of information she could provide. The estate layout was impressive, 12 acres of waterfront property, the main house a sprawling modern structure with multiple wings and underground levels. Security was extensive, guards, cameras, motion sensors, the kind of setup that suggested Castellano knew people were coming for him. Evelyn studied the blueprints with the same focus she brought to surgical procedures, looking for weaknesses, entry points, places where the security could be breached. Her veterinary training gave her unexpected insights. She understood sight lines, patrol patterns, the way predators and prey moved through space. By the time Maria brought lunch, Evelyn had identified 3 potential vulnerabilities in Castellano's defenses and was sketching out a 4th. She ate absently, barely tasting the food, her mind working through tactical problems she'd never imagined confronting. You should rest, dear, Maria said gently, collecting the empty dishes. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You're pregnant and running on adrenaline. That's not fine. Maria's expression was kind, but firm. Mr. DeLuca would want you to take care of yourself. Mr. DeLuca is planning to assault a fortified estate tomorrow night. I think he has bigger concerns. You are his biggest concern. You and the baby. Maria smiled softly. I've worked for Marco for 8 years. I've never seen him like this. Protective, yes, always. But this is different. This is personal. Evelyn looked up from the tablet. You approve of this situation? I approve of family, of loyalty, of a man taking responsibility for his blood. Maria's eyes were warm. How it happened doesn't matter as much as what happens next. And what happens next is you two figuring out how to protect that child. And maybe, if you're lucky, each other. The words stayed with Evelyn long after Maria left. Maybe, if you're lucky, each other. Was that even possible? Could something real grow from violation and conspiracy? Could trust develop between a crime boss and the woman carrying his stolen child? The afternoon bled into evening as Evelyn continued working through intelligence files. She heard Marco's voice occasionally, giving orders in rapid Italian, coordinating with his team. The house hummed with purposeful activity, weapons being cleaned, equipment checked, the mechanical preparation for violence. When darkness fell, she finally forced herself to stop. Her eyes burned from screen time, and the baby needed rest even if she didn't. She'd just closed the tablet when Marco appeared in her doorway. "You've been working all day," he said. "So have you." Evelyn gestured at his shoulder. "How's the wound?" "Fine. Healing clean." He moved into the room, his presence somehow larger in the intimate space. "I heard from Carlos. He said you identified several security weaknesses in Castellano's perimeter. I studied the blueprints, found some gaps in the camera coverage, and places where the patrol routes create blind spots." She stood, suddenly self-conscious. "I don't know if it's useful." "It's very useful. Professional mercenaries missed what you caught." Marco's expression held something like respect. "You have good tactical instincts." "I have veterinary instincts. I understand how animals move through territory. Apparently that translates." "Apparently." Marco was quiet for a moment. "I came to say thank you for helping, and to check on you before I finalize tomorrow's operation." "I'm fine. The baby's fine." Evelyn moved closer, drawn by something she didn't want to examine too carefully. "But you're worried." "I'm always worried before an operation. It's what keeps me alive." "This is different, though. This is about us, about him." She pressed her hand to her stomach. "You're not just protecting territory or settling a business dispute. You're going to war for your son." "Our son," Marco corrected. "And for you, for the violation you suffered, for the future you deserve." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his hand covered hers on her stomach. "I need you to understand something, Evelyn. Tomorrow night, I'm going to do terrible things. Things that will confirm every fear you have about who I am and what I'm capable of. And I need to know you can live with that." Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, hers small and steady, his larger and marked with scars she hadn't noticed before. "I watched you interrogate prisoners last night, saw what you're willing to do for answers, and it didn't horrify me the way it should have. That probably says something about who I'm becoming, or about the situation forcing you to adapt." "Maybe." She met his eyes. "But I think it's more than that. I think I understand now that the world isn't as simple as I used to believe. That sometimes the only thing stopping monsters is someone willing to become one." Marco's expression was unreadable. "I'm not a hero, Evelyn." "I know, but you're mine. Ours. The only one standing between our son and the people who want to use him." She turned her hand beneath his, interlacing their fingers. "So do what you need to do tomorrow. Be as terrible as necessary. Just come back alive." "I will." The promise was absolute. "I swear it." They stood like that in the gathering darkness, bound by biology and choice, and the impossible situation that had forged something neither of them could name yet. Then Marco lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, gentle, reverent, completely at odds with the violence he was planning. "Sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult for both of us." "Marco?" Evelyn stopped him as he turned to leave. "When this is over, when Castellano is gone and the threat is eliminated, what happens to us?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." "So would I." After he left, Evelyn lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on her stomach where the baby grew. Tomorrow Marco would walk into danger for them, would risk everything to eliminate the threat hanging over their heads, and she would wait, helpless and terrified and hoping desperately that the man who'd crashed her wedding would survive long enough to meet his son. The ocean crashed against rocks outside her window, eternal and indifferent, but inside her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope took root and refused to let go. Tomorrow would bring violence, but maybe, if they survived it, tomorrow would also bring the beginning of something that looked almost like a future. The next morning arrived with deceptive tranquility. Evelyn woke to sunlight streaming through her windows and the distant cry of gulls, as if the universe hadn't marked this day for violence. She dressed carefully in comfortable clothes that accommodated her slowly changing body, then made her way downstairs to find the house transformed into a war room. Marco's men moved with quiet efficiency, checking weapons and equipment with the practiced ease of soldiers before deployment. The dining table was covered in laptops and tactical maps. The air hummed with focused energy that made Evelyn's skin prickle with nervous anticipation. She found Marco in his study, dressed in dark tactical gear that made him look even more dangerous than usual. He was reviewing something on his phone, his expression carved from stone. When he sensed her presence and looked up, his features softened slightly. "You should eat something," he said. "Maria made breakfast." "I'm not hungry." Evelyn moved into the room, drawn by a need to be close to him that she didn't want to examine. "When do you leave?" 3 hours. We move at dusk when visibility drops, but there's still enough light to navigate. Marco set down his phone. "Carlos will stay here with you and half the security team. The house is locked down. No one gets in or out without authorization." "And you'll have enough people for the assault?" "More than enough. I called in favors from families in New York and Philadelphia. Castellano made enemies when he started this clinic scheme. Turns out several other bosses had their genetic material stolen too. They're very motivated to see him removed." Evelyn absorbed this, the realization settling like cold water in her stomach. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about sending a message. It's always been about sending a message, that you don't violate the natural order, that you don't weaponize children, that some lines, once crossed, end in blood. Marco's voice was matter-of-fact. Castellano crossed every line that matters. Now he pays the price. "And Dr. Weston? The clinic director who disappeared? We found her yesterday. She's been in a safe house in Vermont trying to arrange passage to Canada." Marco's smile was sharp. "She'll be waiting for me when I get back. After I deal with Castellano, we'll have a very long conversation about everyone else involved in this conspiracy." The casual promise of violence should have disturbed her. Instead, Evelyn felt a fierce satisfaction that the woman who'd violated her body would face consequences. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Please." Marco crossed to her, his hands coming up to frame her face with surprising gentleness, given the tactical gear and weapons he wore. "I'm always careful. It's what's kept me alive this long. This is different. You're not just protecting territory or settling scores. You're walking into a fortified estate held by a man who knows you're coming, which is why I've planned for every contingency." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I know what I'm doing, Evelyn. Trust me." "I do." The admission surprised her with its truth. "I trust you, I just don't trust fate." "Then trust this." Marco leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, the gesture intimate and grounding. "I'm coming back, to you, to our son. I'm coming back because for the first time in my life, I have something worth coming back for." Evelyn's breath caught. Before she could respond, before she could process the weight of those words, Marco stepped back, and the crime boss reasserted himself over the man. "Carlos has his orders. You stay in the house, stay away from windows, and if anything goes wrong, you follow his instructions without question." Marco's tone brooked no argument. "Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He turned back to his desk, collecting his phone and what looked like blueprints. "I need to brief the team. You should eat something, even if you're not hungry. The baby needs it." After he left, Evelyn stood in the empty study for a long moment, trying to steady her racing heart. Then she forced herself to go to the kitchen, where Maria had indeed prepared a spread that could feed an army. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing, watching the clock tick toward the moment Marco would leave. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Evelyn tried to distract herself with work. Video consultations with her veterinary patients, reviewing treatment plans, anything to keep her mind occupied. But her attention kept drifting to the windows where she could see Marco's team making final preparations. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Marco appeared in her doorway one last time. He was fully armed now, multiple weapons visible, his expression set in the hard lines of a man preparing for battle. "We're moving out," he said simply. Evelyn stood, her hands trembling slightly. "Marco?" "Don't." He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulling her against him with an intensity that stole her breath. "Don't say goodbye. This isn't goodbye." "Then what is it?" "It's see you soon." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "A few hours, that's all. And when I come back, this will be over. You'll be safe. Our son will be safe. We can finally figure out what comes next." Evelyn wanted to believe him. wanted to trust in his confidence and planning and the deadly competence of the men following him into danger, but fear clawed at her throat anyway. "Come back to me," she whispered. "Always." Marco kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then, briefly, devastatingly, her mouth. The kiss was gentle but absolute, a promise sealed in touch. Then he was gone, striding out the door without looking back. Evelyn moved to the window and watched the convoy of black SUVs pull away from the estate. 4 vehicles disappearing down the long drive and into the gathering dusk, taking Marco toward violence and danger and the man who'd orchestrated the violation of her body and autonomy. "He'll come back." Carlos appeared beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "I've worked for Marco for 7 years. I've seen him walk into situations that should have been suicide missions. He always comes back." "There's a first time for everything," Evelyn said quietly. "Not today." Carlos's voice was certain. "Today he has too much to lose." The waiting was torture. Evelyn tried to read, to work, to do anything besides stare at the clock. Carlos kept her updated with terse text messages from the team. They'd reached Greenwich, they were in position, they were beginning the approach. Each message made her heart race faster. Then the messages stopped. Evelyn stared at her phone, willing it to buzz with another update. Minutes ticked by. 5, 10, 15. Nothing. "That's normal," Carlos said, reading her expression. "Radio silence during active operations. They can't risk communications being intercepted." "How long?" "Could be 30 minutes. Could be 2 hours. Depends on resistance and complications. 2 hours of not knowing whether Marco was alive or dead. 2 hours of imagining every possible disaster." Evelyn thought she might lose her mind. She paced the living room, her hand constantly moving to her stomach where the baby rested, oblivious to the danger his father was facing. She'd only known Marco for a handful of days, but somehow in that compressed time frame he'd become essential. Not just as the father of her child, but as something more. Something she wasn't ready to name, but couldn't deny. An hour passed. Then another. The sun set completely, plunging the estate into darkness broken only by security lights. Evelyn's nerves were stretched to breaking when Carlos's phone finally buzzed. He read the message, and his expression shifted to something that looked like relief. They breached the perimeter, encountering heavy resistance but advancing. Casualties? 2 injured, non-critical. Marco's fine. Carlos kept reading. They've secured the east wing, working toward Castellano's location now. More waiting, more silence. Evelyn felt like she was vibrating out of her skin with anxiety. She'd performed complex surgeries with steadier hands than she had now. Another message. Carlos's expression hardened. They've engaged Castellano's personal guard. Heavy firefight. Multiple... He stopped reading aloud. Multiple what? Evelyn demanded. Multiple hostiles down. Our team is advancing. The clinical language couldn't hide the reality. People were dying. Marco was in the middle of it, fighting for his life and theirs. Evelyn sank onto the couch, feeling dizzy. Breathe, Carlos said firmly. Just breathe. Marco knows what he's doing. Another 15 minutes of silence that felt like years. Then Carlos's phone rang, an actual call, not a text. He answered in rapid Italian, his expression impossible to read. Evelyn watched him, trying to parse meaning from tone and body language. Finally, he hung up and turned to her. It's done. They have Castellano. Alive? Barely. Marco wanted him alive for questioning. Carlos's smile was grim. He'll wish he was dead before this is over. And Marco? Evelyn's voice cracked. Is he hurt? Minor injuries. Nothing serious. He's overseeing the cleanup now, securing evidence, making sure every piece of the conspiracy is documented. Carlos's expression softened. He asked me to tell you specifically that he's fine and he'll be home soon. The relief was so intense it made Evelyn's knees weak. She pressed her hands over her face, feeling tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed finally breaking through. Marco was alive. He'd done what he promised. He was coming back. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. Thank the man who just dismantled a criminal empire for you and your son. It was another 2 hours before the SUVs returned. Evelyn heard them before she saw them, the distinctive rumble of engines approaching up the drive. She was at the door before Carlos could stop her, yanking it open and running out into the cool night air. The vehicles pulled up, and men poured out, some wounded, all exhausted, but victorious. And then Marco emerged from the lead SUV, and Evelyn's heart stuttered in her chest. He was covered in blood, some his, some definitely not. His tactical gear was torn in places. A nasty cut across his temple had been hastily bandaged. But he was alive, he was walking, and when he saw her, his entire expression transformed. "Evelyn," he started. She crashed into him before he could finish, wrapping her arms around him despite the blood and the weapons and the violence he represented. Marco caught her, his grip almost desperate, burying his face in her hair. "I told you I'd come back," he said against her temple. "You're hurt." Evelyn pulled back just enough to assess him with a doctor's eye. "That cut needs stitches. And you're limping. What else is injured?" "Nothing that won't heal." Marco cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. "I'm fine. We won. It's over." "Castellano?" "Being held in a secure location. He's talking, giving us names, locations, everyone involved in the clinic conspiracy." Marco's expression was savage. "By tomorrow morning, we'll have dismantled the entire operation. Everyone who knew about the genetic theft, everyone who profited from it, everyone who threatened you and our son. Gone." The finality in his voice was absolute. Evelyn should have been horrified by the implied violence. Instead, she felt safe for the first time since armored SUVs had crashed through her wedding. "Come inside," she said. "Let me look at your injuries properly." Marco allowed himself to be led into the house, his men dispersing to their own medical care and debriefing. Maria had already set up the kitchen as a triage station again, and Evelyn fell into the familiar rhythm of cleaning wounds and assessing damage. The cut on Marco's temple required 8 stitches. He'd taken a knife wound to his thigh that he'd been ignoring. Multiple bruises and abrasions covered his torso, but nothing life-threatening, nothing that wouldn't heal. "You got lucky," Evelyn said as she bandaged the last injury. "I got good." Marco caught her hand. "And I had motivation. The baby." "You." His dark eyes held hers. "Both of you. Everything." Evelyn's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. "Marco, I need to tell you something." He stood, wincing slightly at the movement, and led her away from the bustle of the kitchen to the quiet of his study. Once inside, he closed the door and turned to face her fully. "When I was in Castellano's estate, fighting through his guards, all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you. Not just because of the baby or obligation or responsibility, because of you, Evelyn. Because in the handful of days since I crashed your wedding, you've become the most important thing in my world." "We barely know each other," she whispered, but her heart was racing. "I know everything that matters. I know you're brave and stubborn and brilliant. I know you adapted to an impossible situation with grace I didn't expect. I know you looked at my world, at the violence and the crime and the darkness, and didn't run." Marco moved closer. "I know that when I kissed you before I left, it felt like the first real thing I'd felt in years." Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the truth of his words resonating in her chest. "I don't know what this is between us," Marco continued. "I don't know if it's real or just adrenaline and proximity and the biological bond of the baby, but I want to find out. I want time to figure out if this could be something more than just co-parenting and shared trauma." "I want that too," Evelyn admitted. "I've wanted it since you stood in that panic room door covered in blood, and I realized I'd been more terrified of losing you than of the men trying to kill us." Marco's expression shifted to something that looked like wonder. "You were worried about me?" "Terrified." She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "Absolutely terrified. Because you'd become essential somehow. Not just as protection or the father of my baby, but as—" She stopped, struggling for words. "As something more," Marco finished softly. "As something more," she agreed. This time when Marco kissed her, it wasn't gentle or brief. It was deep and claiming and full of all the emotion they'd both been holding back. Evelyn melted into it, her hands fisting in his torn tactical vest, feeling the solid reality of him alive and here and hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco rested his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, don't deserve this, but I'm selfish enough to want it anyway. Then take it. Evelyn's voice was steady. Take this chance. Take whatever time we have to figure out what comes next. What if I can't give you the life you deserve? What if my world is too dark, too dangerous? What if it's not? Evelyn countered. What if we build something new, something that protects our son but also gives him a real family? A real family, Marco repeated, like he was testing the words. I haven't had that since my father died. Neither have I, not really. Evelyn pressed her hand to her stomach. But maybe we could create it, for him and for us. Marco covered her hand with his, both of them connected to the life growing between them. I want that, more than I've wanted anything. Then let's try. Evelyn smiled, feeling hope bloom warm and insistent in her chest. Let's finish dismantling this conspiracy, protect our son, and figure out how to be a family. However that looks. However that looks, Marco agreed. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Marco systematically dismantled every piece of the clinic conspiracy. Dr. Weston, brought back from Vermont, provided testimony that exposed the entire network in exchange for witness protection. Castellano and his lieutenants were handed over to federal authorities with enough evidence to guarantee life sentences. The Riverside Fertility Clinic was shut down, its records subpoenaed, its criminal practices exposed. Other families that had been victimized by the genetic theft scheme came forward. Some wanted justice, others wanted privacy. Marco helped all of them, using his connections to ensure that the innocent were protected while the guilty faced consequences. Evelyn worked alongside him, using her medical expertise to help identify which procedures had been legitimate and which had been part of the conspiracy. It felt good to have purpose beyond fear, to actively dismantle the system that had violated her. And through it all, she and Marco grew closer. It started with small things, shared meals where they talked about everything except crime and pregnancy, walks along the beach where Marco told her about his childhood and she shared stories about veterinary school, quiet evenings watching the sunset together, their hands intertwined, building intimacy from proximity and choice rather than just biological necessity. 3 weeks after the assault on Greenwich, Evelyn had her first official prenatal appointment with the obstetrician Dr. Chen had recommended. Marco insisted on coming, which surprised her until she saw his face when the ultrasound showed their son moving and growing, perfectly healthy. That's him, Marco said, his voice rough with emotion. That's our boy. That's our boy, Evelyn agreed, watching the tiny heartbeat flicker on the screen. The doctor confirmed what they already knew. The pregnancy was progressing normally. The baby was measuring right on schedule. Everything looked perfect. You're at 15 weeks now, the doctor said. In a few weeks, you might start feeling movement, and we can do another ultrasound at 20 weeks to check development. After the appointment, as they walked to the car, Marco was quieter than usual. Evelyn glanced at him, worried. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. That's what's strange. Marco stopped, turning to face her fully. A month ago, I didn't know you existed. Didn't know about the baby. Didn't know my life was about to change completely. And now I can't imagine going back to how things were before. Neither can I, Evelyn admitted. Even though how we got here was terrible, I can't regret where we ended up. Where we ended up, Marco repeated. Which is where exactly? We haven't really defined this. Evelyn took a breath, gathering courage. I think we're building a family. Not the traditional kind, not the kind I planned when I went to that clinic, but something real anyway. I want more than co-parenting, Marco said bluntly. I want this, us, a real relationship, not just shared custody and polite communication. So do I. Evelyn stepped closer. I don't know how to make it work long term. Your world and mine are so different, but I want to try. Then let's try. Marco's hands found hers. Move in with me, not as a prisoner or someone under protection, but as my partner. Help me raise our son. Build a life that's ours, not dictated by circumstance or fear. You want me to move in? Evelyn's heart raced. I want you to stay permanently as my... Marco paused, searching for the right word. As my family. Family. The words settled over Evelyn like a benediction. Not wife, not girlfriend, not co-parent. Family. Simple and encompassing and exactly right. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll stay. The kiss they shared in the hospital parking lot was full of promise and hope, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected, but both desperately wanted. 2 months later, Evelyn stood in Marco's home office, their home office now, reviewing adoption papers for 3 dogs from the shelter she still volunteered with remotely. She'd integrated her veterinary practice into her new life, conducting video consultations and working with a partner to handle the cases that required in-person treatment. Her pregnancy was obvious now, her body changing to accommodate the growing baby. She was nearly 6 months along, and the baby kicked regularly, strong movements that made Marco smile every time he felt them. He's going to be a fighter, Marco had said that morning, his hand spread across her stomach. With you as his father, how could he not be? Evelyn had teased. Now, as evening settled over the ocean, she heard Marco's footsteps on the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, and she smiled at the sight of him. He'd been in meetings all day, legitimate business meetings, sorting out the legal operations he was expanding while quietly divesting from the criminal enterprises that had built his empire. It was a slow process, but he was determined to build something their son could be proud of, something that didn't require violence to maintain. Tired? She asked. Exhausted. Marco crossed to her, pulling her into his arms and resting his chin on top of her head. But it's worth it, all of it. The meetings went well? Better than expected. The shipping company acquisition is moving forward. By the time our son is born, I'll be running mostly legitimate operations. He pressed a kiss to her temple. A boring businessman instead of a crime boss. You could never be boring, Evelyn said, but I appreciate the effort. It's not effort, it's necessity. Marco turned her to face him. I want our son to have choices I never did. I want him to inherit something he doesn't have to hide from. He's lucky to have you as his father. We're all lucky. Marco's hand settled on her stomach, where the baby kicked as if in agreement. Lucky that something so wrong led to something so right. Evelyn couldn't argue with that. The clinic conspiracy had been a violation. The kidnapping had been traumatic. The danger had been real and terrifying. But it had also brought her to this moment, standing in the home she now shared with the father of her child, building a life neither of them had planned but both desperately wanted. I never thought my wedding day would end like this, she said softly. Standing here, pregnant, with the man who crashed my ceremony and stole me away. Regrets? Marco asked, his voice carefully neutral. Not even one. Evelyn turned in his arms to face him fully. Richard was safe, predictable, exactly what I thought I wanted. But you're what I needed. Challenge and protection and partnership all wrapped up in a package that terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. I love you, Marco said, the words simple and devastating. I know it's fast. I know we built this backward. But I love you, Evelyn. You and our son. My family. Tears pricked Evelyn's eyes. I love you too. I think I have since you stood between me and those bullets, choosing to protect instead of retreat. Then marry me. Marco's hands framed her face. Not because of obligation or the baby or convention, but because we choose each other, because we want to build this family on purpose, not just circumstance. Yes, Evelyn said without hesitation. Yes, I'll marry you. This kiss was different from all the others, soft and sweet and full of promises they'd both keep. When they broke apart, both were smiling. We'll do it right this time, Marco said. Small ceremony, just people we love. No armored SUVs or gunfire. That sounds perfect. They married 3 weeks later in a quiet ceremony on the beach behind their home. Evelyn wore a simple white dress that accommodated her pregnancy, flowers in her hair instead of a veil. Marco wore a dark suit and an expression of absolute contentment. Carlos stood as best man. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. Evelyn's parents attended, her mother still processing but trying to accept, her father quietly approving in the way he approved of all things that made his daughter happy. When the officiant pronounced them married, Marco kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion of a man who'd found something he never expected and would protect with his life. "I love you, Mrs. DeLuca," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Evelyn whispered back. Their son was born on a clear October morning, arriving 3 weeks early with a cry that announced he was absolutely his father's child, loud, demanding, and impossible to ignore. Marco held him with shaking hands, this tiny human they'd created accidentally but loved intentionally, and Evelyn watched her husband's face transform with wonder. "He's perfect," Marco said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's ours," Evelyn agreed. They named him Salvatore, after the man who'd given Marco a second chance. Sal for short. And as Evelyn held her husband and son in the hospital room, she thought about the journey that had brought them here. A wedding that never happened. A kidnapping that became salvation. A conspiracy that led to love. A child conceived without choice who'd become the center of their world. It was messy and complicated and nothing like what she'd planned. It was also absolutely perfect. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked, reading her expression. "That I'm grateful," Evelyn said honestly, "for all of it. The chaos and the fear and the danger, because it brought me here. To you, to us, to this family we built from wreckage and choice." "We did build it, didn't we?" Marco pressed a kiss to her forehead, then to baby Sal's. "Something real and lasting and ours." "Ours," Evelyn agreed, looking at her husband and son with a heart so full it ached. Outside the hospital window, the world continued its chaotic spin. Somewhere, people were making plans that would fall apart. Somewhere, others were facing impossible choices. Somewhere, lives were being upended by circumstances beyond their control. But in this room, in this moment, Evelyn Carter, now Evelyn DeLuca, had everything that mattered. A husband who'd fought through hell to protect her. A son who represented hope and future and the possibility of redemption. A family built not on perfect beginnings, but on the choice to love anyway. The wedding that wasn't hers had led to the life she never knew she wanted, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it.